Meanwhile, back at the refrigerator, I realized something because I realized that somebody didn't respond in the way that I'm like inured to people responding when talking about like disability discrimination at jobs. So, like, I'm a disabled person who is lucky that I've always been able to work and get steady work in the type of work that I do. And after like 10, 15 years of that, I'm now like in grad school and in a professional program, with people of all ages, but definitely with some people that are like pretty young and like, may not have worked or had much work experience and are kind of getting all this job advice and like not having the experience to know whether it's true. So I think the thing that really bothers me, there's two things I'm thinking about here. One thing is when people give people advice that is very limiting and discouraging for disabled students, and they tell them things that aren't true. So trying to think of a good example. I don't know, let's say that like somebody can't sit still at a desk. They have to pace around and they like to be in constant motion when they're at work. And somebody is like, this will never fly in the real world, like in a real job, you have to sit at a desk all day. And it's like, okay, that's not true. Like if you're an adult and that is like a need that you have, like, and you've already had years of work, like you will know that there are jobs that you can do. Even sometimes like office jobs, there are times where like with the right employer, like you can make things work. And if you're older, you have that experience yourself. But like, it grinds my gears to think of like a young person being told that, like not having the experience to know. And like, I want to say I'm confused why people would tell a young person this, because it is basically saying like, you shouldn't be in school, you shouldn't be in this professional program, you're never going to be able to work. So like, you should just give up. I think what people think, which is also annoying, I think a lot of the time when people hear someone like describe their limitations or describe their access needs, a lot of non-disabled people have this idea like, well, that's annoying, I don't like that, so I'll simply try to scare the person out of saying that they have this need, and then they'll just sort of get over it and they won't have that need anymore. Like, oh, you say you can't sit still? Well, you'll never be able to have a job, and like, blah, 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 blah. And like, good, okay, now the person will be so scared they won't have this issue anymore. In reality, I think like the ability to like assess what your needs are and what your abilities are and be able to realistically predict like what you'll be able to do and like what you should and shouldn't take on, I think is like the most important skill in the world, especially for disabled people, because I feel like there's often like a lot of social pressure that like sometimes isn't even intentional or anything, but like if you need things that like most people don't need, or things that like most people don't anticipate, or things that like don't really make sense to most people like intuitively when they're described, like that can be really like tough, because it almost feels like there's this kind of like social and almost like this mental pressure to like not see it and like not acknowledge it, because other people don't really acknowledge it, or like this isn't in like the context of things that you think about. So like being able to recognize that about yourself and like sort of hold firm, and be like, no, like it is true, like I can't sit at a desk, and like I do know this, and like I am keeping this in mind because I actually want to do jobs that like I'm able to succeed in. Like that's such an important skill. And people try to take it away from disabled people all the time in the guise of like empowering or encouraging us or something. Like they think that it's empowering to tell people that they're too stupid to know what they can and can't do. Okay, I should probably pull back a little bit. I think it's always a good idea to try new things and try to learn new things. Even if you're disabled, there's things I like thought I'd never be able to do because I'm too disabled that like I may have like been able to do over like a long period of time, like a little bit. And like that's like a win, and that's exciting for me. Like I have a really poor sense of direction. I didn't understand like north, south, east, west until I was like in my early 20s, and like I still get lost like very easily, but like these sort of like there's like a couple of neighborhoods in my city that I know really well and that I can like find my way around really easily, and that feels great. I'm really proud of that. But like I still don't want some other person to like come in when I'm just trying to like set a boundary, like, hey, like, I think like I probably can't get there at that time because like I get lost really easily and it's gonna take me a long time to get there. And then somebody's like, oh, that's not true, you can do it. Like, why don't you agree to come this earlier time that you can't do? Like, fuck off. So yeah, so there's that. I don't like that. I don't like young people being told that. I don't like being told it myself either, because like I know. Why do you think I don't know this? What do you think I've been doing like all this time? So the other thing is like kind of noticing, as somebody who's like worked in more informal jobs most of my life, wasn't really aware. Sometimes like job listings have things that are discriminatory in terms of like it's not part of the job. So like one example is like office jobs requiring like you to be able to lift things as like one of the requirements. A big thing that I've noticed because I can't drive is when jobs don't require driving as part of the job, but they require a driver's license. That's like a big thing that like filters me out of a lot of jobs. And like when I'm in the process of like a career change, that is something that I think about a lot, like, you know. So I've noticed that when talking about this, especially the driver's license thing, it's like a lot of non-disabled people will respond in this really patronizing way where they seem to think that like I perhaps just like didn't read the job listing, and they're like, didn't you know that like that job probably does require driving and like you just didn't notice? Or they'll like explain certain jobs to me, like they'll be like, didn't you know that like during the job like you might have to like travel to different locations throughout the day? And it's like, yes, like in a city where like all of the locations involved are in the same neighborhood. Like, it's like this idea that like I'm simply too stupid to read a job description, that there's no way, because like I think like maybe non-disabled people like don't want to see that a lot of things are really discriminatory. I think like if they had to admit that like a lot of jobs require a driver's license that don't require driving, and that does like filter out some disabled people, like I don't know, I guess that would overwhelm them. Maybe they would realize like maybe, you know, those disabled people are gonna take their jobs or something. So they want to like go into this whole thing where like, oh, don't you know that's actually necessary or whatever? And I'm like, it's literally not. Like I've like, there have been times where like I've known someone who does a certain job, I know that they don't drive, and then like the listing requires a license. So the only difference between them and me is that they had the ability to get a driver's license, whereas I didn't. So yeah, that's discriminatory. Like, yeah. So yeah, I think short version is I was having a conversation and I was like very surprised that the other person basically was like, yeah, that sounds discriminatory. It sounds like they're requiring something that isn't part of the job. And I was like, you believed it, like you understand. Like the way that people will start trying to like explain discrimination by explaining that perhaps disabled people just shouldn't be there is just like really annoying. And I don't like it because I'm old enough that it's not a problem for me, but I'm not okay with other people with less experience being told that, because it's not true.